All right, I have 2:02 on my computer, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Ugly Truths, 5 tough questions to shape your arts career. I'm Aili McGill, and I'm the Executive Director of Nickel Plate Arts, which is based in Noblesville and serves 5 communities in Hamilton County: Fishers, Noblesville, Cicero, Arcadia, and Atlanta. I will say that Nickel Plate Arts is open to any artist, really anywhere. And so any of you who maybe don't live in Hamilton County, you're still welcome to submit your artwork to our shows, and we'd love to work with you. And I am joined today by the incomparable Stuart Sager, who is an internationally recognized illustrator, working primarily in the comic book industry. He is well known for Lego Bionicle, which was the most widely distributed comic book in the world, in what, 6 languages, Stuart? Something like that? 8 languages. He's also done work recently for, he's worked on The Walking Dead. He's worked on, You're the Villain, the Joker, and has done a whole series of Kiss comic book covers lately. He's been working in the comic book industry since, what, 2001, 2004?
It ramps up to that whole time, yes, but certainly full-time by about 2003.
And is living the dream. So Stuart's here today to help share some of his experiences, his perspective, and our goal for today's session is to really help you think and reorient yourself. During times like we've had with COVID-19 and all the craziness of 2020, it can be easy to just focus on treading water and not taking a minute to get your head above that water and think deeply about where you are and what you're doing. So we are going to ask you some tough questions today, and we really want you to answer to yourself. Nobody else has to know your answer, but answer as brutally honestly as you can in an effort to help you make strong choices to advance your career in the direction that you want to go. Stuart, you take it away. Tell us more about you. I gave you an introduction, but we want to know more.
Well, you covered most of the big stuff. I think one of the things that I should mention in this presentation is that when people ask me what I do for a profession, I always describe myself as an illustrator rather than an artist. What's the key difference between those two? Typically, an illustrator is working in conjunction with an editor and art director. I very often am given assignments. I have someone whom I have to answer to. Yeah, I got to draw these Kiss comics, but it wasn't something that I did just completely on my own accord. I had to get approval on all the art from not just my editor, the publisher, as well as all the band members. There were a lot of people to please, and there are times that I think something is a great idea that perhaps the people above me may not agree with, and one of the skills I have to have is to be able to take all that in, give them what they want rather than what I want.
Excellent. I think that's a great distinction. And it's those kind of distinctions we want to really explore today. So what we encourage you to do now is pull out a sheet of scrap paper or open up a note-taking app on your phone and jot down your answers to these questions. We're not going to have you share them with anybody, but we really would like you to go through the process of answering them yourself so that you can come back in the future and see where you were, and also so that you can really make sure that you're being as honest with yourself as possible.
That's the key. That's the key.
Right.
We want you to really, really be honest, because I've done this exercise with a couple people, and they always come up with different answers after they do it the second time.
We also want to note some of the things we're going to talk about today are probably going to be a little challenging and might challenge you in a way that causes you to bristle, and that's okay. How many opportunities do we have to sort of challenge ourselves in this industry as we're working forward? Feel free to send us messages in the chat. We don't expect you to necessarily agree with everything we say. We just hope that we can help you think larger and maybe think differently or consider a perspective you hadn't considered before, even if you reject it completely. That's cool. So let me share my screen. And let me go through the PowerPoint. All right, so question number 1. If you are a practicing artist, if you are working for an arts organization, think about the artists that you work with. But if you're a practicing artist, what is your real goal as an artist? And we mean your real goal. Are you in this to make money? Are you here to make your daily living out of this? Are you looking for fame? Do you want to have your work just be recognized? Are you pursuing your passion by doing this? Is that the most important thing to you? What is that single most motivating factor in what you do?
And this is where I think that option F down there's something uglier becomes really important, because I always I had this conversation, I had this idea, just tell people really list all the reasons you're doing this, and something uglier can be all of these things, if not more. Get dates, meet girls, shut your parents up, prove everybody you were wrong, prove yourself, something to yourself, make your neighbor mad. If your motivation is to make your neighbor mad, let's be honest with yourself and write that down. Okay. I don't think that is the best motivation, but it's kind of hard to achieve your goals if you can't really identify what they are. I've known people who got into rock and roll bands to meet girls. Okay. If that's the point, then say it.
Excellent. And so Stuart, let's turn this on you for a moment. When you were first starting out 20 years ago, what was your goal at that point?
So back up a slide just to the first one, because I think that at least for me, these first couple things all had to be addressed. Money had to be one, fame had to be one, pursue your passion, so on and so forth. These were all things that I felt like I had to quantify. In my case, when I first entered the comic book industry, my goal was I didn't want to lose money. I wanted to pay for all my expenses. Okay, that sounds simple, but I wanted more parameters on that. How quickly did I have to break even, right? Was fame important to me? Was it important if I got a great job, but my name wasn't attached to it? Was I willing to, maybe even do some work that I wouldn't get any credit for at all? I wanted to go through all of these. And at least for me, early on, what I wanted to do was I wanted to be able to make enough money that I could pay my rent, that I didn't have to have a second job. If I could do that, then I could adjust things later. But I really did enter my profession with the idea that money was more important than fame, and that I was well aware that I was going to compromise my passion. I knew that I was going to try to work for editors and land specific jobs. And so I had to compromise all kinds of things. I had to learn to use computer programs that I was not interested in, because that's what my industry demanded. That's why I really try to embrace that title of illustrator, and rather than artist, because to me, they're two different things.
Excellent. And we know that these are a little tongue-in-cheek, but we want to point out that some of these uglier motivations are there for all of us. And as we balance our goals and what we want to accomplish, we do need to identify those, to honor them and figure out how to serve them, and how they may limit our success or our ability to achieve in other areas. I will say too that in my work at Nickel Plate, when I meet new artists who come in, those who are really clear on these goals, even if their goals are a little ugly or a little self-serving, those are the artists who tend to get moving more quickly and get satisfaction more quickly, because they're really clear about what they're trying to get out of this. And it's easier for them to interact with me as a director, right? They can be very clear about what they want. And that's really helpful, because then I can garner the resources they need or send them in the right direction. Okay, so if you've answered that question, question number 2, how do you define success? And we want you to be really specific here if you can. If you are looking for money, how much is enough? Stuart already mentioned that when he started out, he just wanted to cover his expenses. He didn't want to lose money on this deal. I suspect that has evolved over time, but right now, today, what is success look
my
like?
money number is much, much higher these days. I will be quite honest. It is still a factor. I'm pretty comfortable, but I want more money. I want more control. I've adjusted my goals, and I've reevaluated some of these as well. And I think people should, but I think that a lot of people, if they're artists and they're getting started, they have this idea, they just want to get their stuff out there. I've met many people who say, so I work in the comic book industry. A lot of people, I've asked this question of them, well, what do you want to do with your work? And they said, I just want it out there. And I would say, well, why don't you scan it and put it on the internet for free? And they almost always come back to me and say, no, I want more control than that, or I want to make some money off of it. In which case I say, well, you just told me all you wanted was to get your art out there. So make the hard list, answer these questions, because everybody I know who goes through this list, when they're really honest, they feel uncomfortable because they feel like they're asking too much. You could play the same game and ask, what are you looking for in, a date? You sound really shallow if you say, wow, I really want my date to be really funny, really attractive, really rich, really patient with me. But if those are really the things you want, you better write them down.
And just to run through these for folks who may not be looking at their screen, your other options that we are offering are success can be how much money you make, success can be achieving fame, and then think about how much fame and how you define fame. Success could look like having fans of your work, people who recognize your work out in the world or who seek you out. Success could be having your work validated by the director of an organization or a school or by winning an award. Success could be being true to your art, feeling like you are making the thing you want to make. Unlike what Stuart was talking about a little while ago, where he's got to please editors. If you want to please your own muse, you need to be really clear about that. Similarly, being true to yourself as an artist, if that is a value that's especially important to you, you really need to be familiar with that and be able to articulate that. Or maybe you have some uglier ideas of what success looks like too. How many dates do you want to go on, for example? But think that through in this conversation. I'm going to scroll forward. My arrow button isn't working. There we go. Question number 3, what does failure look like? If you know what success looks like, I often interact with artists who are very clear on where they want to be, what that success looks like to them and what they're trying to achieve. They don't often think about what failure looks like until it smacks them in the face. And the more you think about how you would define failure for yourself, the easier it is to manage it when and if you're staring it in the face, right? So is bankruptcy failure for you? Would you go all the way to the point of bankruptcy to make your dream happen? Is just getting by not enough, right? Is living on the edge of poverty but selling your artwork, is that not good enough for you? Is hearing somebody diss your work something that will be a failure to you? I know there's some people who intellectually think that's not a big deal, but it hurts so much when you are standing in an exhibit and you see some couple come up to your work and say, oh my gosh, my 4-year-old could do that. That hurts. There's some people who can't handle that. Is general rejection, being kicked out of a show, being not allowed to participate somewhere, is that failure to you? Is a 60-hour plus work week a failure? I can tell you I can't accept that as a failure because that's what I have. But for some people, that's just not, you can't do it. Or is failure something uglier to you as well? Go ahead, Stuart.
I think one of the reasons, so on these slides, we have these things broken down. These aren't things to just consider. I would recommend everybody go through each one of these on the previous slides as well, address each one of these concepts directly. What's going to happen if someone does insult your work? If that is a real big problem for you, then I think you really have to address that and say that I need to find a way to insulate myself from that. If that means I have to get an art rep, if that means I have to sign my work under a different name, if that means that if my work is shown in a gallery, maybe I can't be around for it. But you have to be aware of what your strengths and what your limitations are. I've had some people ask me, what do I have to do to get into the comic book industry? And a lot of what I described sounds like a 60-hour work week. My favorite thing ever happened was there was a gentleman who wrote me an email and I told him what I did to get into the industry. And he said, wow, that sounds awful. Thank you for saving me the time. I don't want to do that. Now, I think he was being sincere, but I kind of love the honesty there because, to be honest, a lot of selling art, a lot of working in this industry, a lot of achieving these kind of goals, the competition is great and the sacrifice is kind of great as well. There are people who are higher up the ladder than you. And I always say, that's how hard they're working. Are you going to work that hard? You may have different skills, different desires. You may not want exactly what they want, but you got to identify what your target is and then how you're going to get there.
I want to take a second just to acknowledge some of the chats that have come in. Snorman, who I don't think I've met, so hi, says, I fail my own standards at times. And that's a really good point too. If you're going to be your biggest critic in this, then you've got to have some system of managing your expectations. And sometimes that's having like sort of a professional mentor who can provide you some objective, I was like, what's the opposite of subjective? Some objective feedback to help you reset your standards. But it also, if you are the standard that matters most to you, that's okay, and then acknowledging that failure and moving on is important. Doris then says, it's that criticism is rough, especially when it comes to your industry standards. Being criticized is rough. I don't consider failure. It's either making money and being popular or not. Pretty much paying my taxes was a huge success this year. Yes, competition, that's a huge aspect of my work. So that's interesting too, the role that competition and both I feel like I interact with a lot of artists who enjoy the friendly competition of, they often apply to the same shows or the same contests, and seeing who wins from year to year is something they enjoy. Sometimes they don't get it, sometimes they beat somebody else, but then sometimes that competition comes down to you get picked for a job and somebody else doesn't, or they get picked for a job over you, and that can be such a hard thing to deal with too. Stuart, on that subject, maybe it's too early, but do you want to talk a little bit about your Lego experience in terms of competition?
So I was asked to try out for the job for Lego. To be honest, I thought there was no way I was going to get the job. In fact, I was approached by DC Comics because Lego had been making a comic book based on their toy line called Bionicle for several years, and they were looking to rebrand it. And they were looking for a new artist with a different style. I'm not typically known for drawing robots, and to be perfectly honest, even though this was a wonderful opportunity, I had a sneaky suspicion that somebody was just trying to come up with another sample, that maybe they'd even already picked their guy. When I was asked to try out for the job, I asked to be paid to try out for the job, because to be honest, I had to weigh it. What's it worth for me to try out for this thing that I had little chance for? I thought of the idea of what did I feel like Lego wanted? And that was, I'm glad I didn't take that path. What I actually figured is, well, what if I make a piece that gives exactly what Lego wants, but it's a art style that I can't live up to? It's better off for me to make something that is a really good example of what I am, swing the bat really hard and try to hit a home run. And it worked out exactly that way. They found my piece to be really fresh. My nightmare could have been that I could have done something that was, by the way, for those who don't know, I have a very loose painterly style. I was surprised Lego wanted that. But had I done what I thought they might have wanted, which is a clean style, I would have been lost in the mix. Now I can tell you, after I got the job, I saw some of the other samples, and there were two artists in particular I thought had great samples, and I was very kind of stunned they didn't pick those artists as well. But I gave it my best shot. I did my thing, and I kind of dictated the terms. I did overthink it, but I was on such a big stage. The only way I can really be successful is if I was myself. I had to play to my strengths. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And one thing I wanted to pull out of what you said too was that you asked to be paid to submit.
And I did get paid. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's important to remember that artists have to be advocates for themselves. So there are some artists listening to this call who really enjoy community projects, who don't, for whom that's maybe not a motivation. But for those of you who are trying to, make a living through your work, you don't need to feel bad about rejecting a project because it's not the maximum use of your time, right? As the director of an arts organization, I have to acknowledge that all the time, that we are going to provide opportunities that are not great for every artist. They're great for some artists and they're the wrong opportunity for others. And it's up to the artist to be able to advocate for themselves and say, that just doesn't really fit with my goals. Or if you really want my participation, here's what I expect. That's really important towards success. And Doris made another comment saying that I feel as though functioning from fear, where does the next paycheck come from, as opposed to from limits, by saying like, I only sell or produce versus how much can I accomplish? That's the big difference for her. And I think that's true. There's the sort of motivation of hunger versus the luxury of being able to set your own limits. Those dynamics really can change how you make decisions and what you produce.
I would love to have a good, I think it would have to be a second discussion, but I think discussing the fears involved with this would be really good. Everybody knows this, but it's important here. I've seen artists underprice their work because of fear. I've seen artists not pursue work that they really should try to get because of fear. I kind of feel like a lot of your best work comes from fear. That is to say, put yourself in a dangerous situation and, try to do your best. I know a lot of people who deal with this, and I always try to say, whether you're worried about being judged or not getting a job, I think a pretty good bulletproof position to be in is to say, this is the best piece I put my all into this. If you like it, that's great. If you don't, that's fine. My failure is not that I didn't try.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like what I did, that's okay. But let me tell you, I'm being judged with this honest entry, this honest effort. No one can be too upset if you do that.
Yeah. I also think that the practicality of that is something that some artists can struggle with, because I've known artists who cannot agree that the piece is done, right? And I've known artists who've gone back to the same painting 2 or 3 times a year for years because it's not done yet. And you know, that fits with their overall strategy. But if you're working on a budget, or you're working on a timeline and you're working on a contract for somebody, that is not a luxury you can afford, right? You have to know when you've put your right effort into it, when it is good enough for the terms of the job, when you can say, this is good enough, and I can accept it as is.
I'll speak directly to that. All the editors I work for, they want the best art they can get, but realistically, what they want more than anything else, they don't want great art. They want good art that's on time.
Right.
That's it. And that's the big difference. You know, if you ask me what an editor, people ask me all the time, what does the editor of, you know, a comic book I'm working on want? What do they really want? And I'll say, I'll tell you what they want. They want to go home to their spouse and their friends and have time to work on their fantasy football league. It's, don't let me get in their way. That's it. Yeah. And that's the biggest lesson. Yeah. What's our next slide?
Yeah. Here we go. So question number 4, sorry, we got sidetracked. Question number 4 is, what are you willing to do to succeed? Really, how far are you willing to take this? So are you willing to risk your life savings to make your goal happen? There are some people who are. There are some people who just cannot see that as a responsible choice. Are you willing to leverage all of your personal relationships to make art happen? Are you willing to force all of your friends to come to your house to look at your art and buy something? You may have to do that. You may have to go back through all of your, you're shaking your head, Stuart. Why are you shaking your head?
You need to leave some relationships in your back pocket. I can't monetize everything,
but by saying that it's in your back
you have
pocket,
to ask
it's fair game, right?
Right.
Even the nature of the way you're setting that up shows I know you think of a lot of your personal relationships as assets you may have to use.
It's funny, you know, I don't want to borrow money from my parents, but if it comes to that, I'm going to ask, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of, I mean, to some extent, when you're talking about something that really deals with being self-employed, and it's self-employed, when you're self-employed, you're the boss. You have to use every asset, every avenue, every resource. You have to realize what they are, identify them. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. As far as I do want to speak up on this, answer A here is risk your life savings. I've met a lot of people who say they wanted to make comic books, and it's expensive. You know, my first printing bill, I think, was not very expensive. It was around $2,000. Now, $2,000 might be a lot of money for you, or it might not. But I want you to know, my first printing bills for a comic book that I spent a year drawing, my big investment in it was not the money for printing. It was the time I put into it. And at that point, I told myself, after I'd invested this much time drawing, I really wanted it to be the nicest, highest quality thing that I could afford. Well, $2,000 was really hard for me to come by. So I looked at my assets, and I kid you not, I had grown up working in a comic book store and had a pretty good comic book collection. I sold it. I sold it to pay for my printing bill. Now, I've mentioned this to a lot of people, and they look terrified. And I get that. But I always say to them, look, for me, it was easy. I said to myself, would I rather make comics or have the comic collection? Either choice is fine. You can do either one. You need to do what makes you happy. In my case, though, I saw this thing as an asset that I could leverage into achieving a greater goal or a greater desire. And that's what I did.
I think that's great. A great example to push people through. I also think we all have to remember that the choices we might make are different than ones that other people will make. And as Stuart said, that doesn't mean one is more legitimate than the other. It's got to be true to you. Right. And I think we have to remember that there may be situations in which you have to choose something ugly, right? Are you willing to lie to get yourself into a gallery? Are you willing to maybe edge out a friend in order to get your work noticed first, or something like that? These are tough choices that you are going to encounter in the art world, and thinking through what that ethical standpoint for yourself is will help make it a lot easier when you get in the heat of a choice like that.
And I think one of the reasons we're bringing all this up is because the other things are easy. we're not trying to paint a picture that everything is cutthroat and really difficult, but you know, there's only so much space on the wall at a gallery. A gallery, they want to put the best art up. They want the people who really prove to them that they're the ones who want to be there, that they've produced the greatest work, that they really, really want it. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people get a job or get an opportunity just because they really stuck their neck out and somebody said, okay, you want to try that hard? I'll give you a shot. And I think that's ultimately what we're kind of talking about here.
Mary Jo just chimed in. Hi there, I'm a community artist using sustainable materials and an educator. I teach at Ivy Tech and some of my students are here today. I've also made a mid-career change from public art that's been successful to community art. So congratulations, Mary Jo. You and your students, please chime in if you have other perspectives or you have questions.
I want to comment on this.
Yeah, go.
So whether Mary Jo did it or not, meant to do it or not, she told me a whole lot about herself, and some of the things that she used to list who she is and what she's doing might have particular interest in me or no interest at all. I love that you're using sustainable materials, but maybe I don't care about that. Maybe that is not my thing. You know, there are some things that we use to make art that sometimes are toxic, and I wrestle with this sometimes. I can have a really good looking piece that I might have to use a spray varnish or something on it, right? That might actually be a little bit toxic. There are times that I might make that sort of compromise. And so what I love is here, you've got a whole bunch of things there that will be hot buzz points for some people that they'll really respond to or not at all. The fact that you have listed these tells me that these are the important points to you, that you want to be these things and fulfill these things.
That's great. We're going to move on to the next slide, but I just wanted to point out too, the photo that I have here is of one of Nickel Plate's very first community outreach events where it was pouring down rain the entire time. For us to succeed, I had to embrace that rain, figure out what we were willing to do to work around it. We decided we weren't willing to cancel the event. We all have to wrestle with what are you willing to do to succeed? And that day I was willing to soak my expensive high heels and get out there and make that event happen.
I remember that day. Yeah.
Yeah. There have been a lot of rainouts for Nickel Plate. So question number 5, this is the last one in our test here, our self-exam. What are your strengths? Are you good at marketing? Are you good at accounting and tax law? Are you good at client management, logistics, negotiation? Are you a shark? We want to point out here that nowhere on this list are any art skills listed. And that's because at a certain point, if you've already got the art skills down, they don't matter anymore, really. Honestly, what it comes down to is how can you leverage these other skills to move yourself forward? You have to know how to do these things.
I want to add to this. So I always feel like this is a great point here to add in the being a shark and write down everything that works. Have a separate list that might be things that can work for you or work against you. You know, I know some people get really excited. I've seen people get on television because they're a great guitar player, not because they're good enough to maybe get on television, but they're good enough at 9 years old. There's a story there because one of their assets is that they're that young, right? So make your list be everything you want. If you are particularly funny, if you are particularly good looking, if you have great connections, you know, you're whatever. One side of your family is the president of IBM and the other side owns Amazon. Those are assets, right? Mm-hmm. And so I would really encourage everybody to list all of these and then figure out sort of how they help sort of leverage your other skills, how your skills stack on top of one another. In theater, this is kind of, can you sing, can you dance, can you tell a joke, right? If you can tell a joke or if you can sing, your dancing will probably be better as well. They can all help each other.
Danielle, I just want to jump in for a second, Stuart, and note Danielle just wrote in the chat that I'm new to art. I'm a student, so I have no idea which would be my strength. And so I'm going to take this opportunity to say you are in a great position right now, Danielle, because if you're really a student, if you're really in school, you should start exploring all of these. If you can take a business class, if you can take an accounting class, if you can take a marketing class while you're still in college, do it. I know so many artists who went through art school and never had access to any of those. And then they get in the real world and suddenly realize that they don't know how to do Instagram and they are way behind everybody else. And so this is a great opportunity for you right now to garner the assets you have around you at whatever school you're in and start learning these skills, because as it says on this slide, you have to have them all. And if you can't have them yourself, you've got to find them in your community and figure out how to leverage them for you.
So I want to tell a story here about this is a good one. I think this is really valuable for everybody here. This was, for those who don't know, I sell a lot of comic books. So often I'm at a comic book convention. I'll meet fans, sign autographs, draw pictures for them. At one particular show, I was in Los Angeles, and I was sitting next to a publisher who published about 6 or 8 comic books a month. There was a fan who had come to my table who was talking to me largely because they were waiting for their opportunity to speak with this publisher. And this fan was a writer who wanted to write comic books. It is hard to get noticed as an artist. It is hard to get noticed as a writer. In this particular case, he wasn't looking to get hired. He had a story, a comic book that he wanted to make, a very specific idea. In this case, I know that this particular person had found an artist and they had collaborated, and he had the book absolutely done, ready to go. It hadn't been printed, but he had really high quality laser printouts of the book. It was drawn, lettered, colored, ready to be published. He was looking for a publisher. And I'd asked him, I said, you know, you've got this whole thing here. Have you thought about self-publishing it? And his answer was, I don't want to do that. I'm not interested in promotion. He wasn't interested in advertising. He really wanted to write. That was what he felt his strength was. And he didn't want to be involved with the other things. So on one hand, he really identified a lot of this stuff. So I thought, okay, you've gone through and answered the questions. Now here's where the story really gets fascinating. While we were waiting, I asked if I could see his book, and he showed it to me. As someone who works in this industry as an artist, I can tell you what is almost always lacking is the art is often not quite up to snuff. But I looked through it and the art was great. And I asked him what the story was and what his hook was, and it was a good story. And I looked at it, and there was something about this book that just told me, I thought, this is it. It is all the pieces are there for this to be good. I really want to see how this presentation goes to this editor. So they finally got talking, and I saw the editor looking at the book. I didn't get to hear a lot of their conversation, but I saw them talk for about 15, 20 minutes. And after their meeting was over, I went over to the editor, the publisher, excuse me, whom I knew a little bit. And I said, so I saw you talking to that gentleman about that book. What do you think? And he said, it's pretty good. And I said, yeah, you going to publish it? Now here's the fun part. He said, I don't think so. And I was stunned because I really thought the story was a good idea, and so was the art. And I said, what's the problem? And he said, kind of sheepishly, but he said, look, you're a pro, you've done this. He said, I looked at his book, I could tell it was good. I asked him, I said, tell me about your book. Tell me what it's about. And I listened to him, and he was boring. Mm. He said he wasn't interesting. He couldn't show me his passion for it. And I said, well, what difference does that make? The book will be good or it won't. You know, he's not going to be there to sell it. And he said, no, that's not true. If I publish his book, I need him to sit at a table with me. I need him to be part of the product. I need people to be excited for him as well as the book. He said, I'd love to publish the book. He himself didn't bring enough charisma, enough presentation. And I can tell you that comic book never came out.
Mm-hmm. And that can be both a heartbreaking tale, but also a good reminder that you are part of your own product, right? And you have to remember that. So your conduct at an event shapes how people what they expect of you in the future. How you dress at that event, I've known, and it's different for every person, right? You've got to really understand your own persona, your own appearance, and how people buy into it. I've seen artists who can go to a gallery opening in jeans with paint all over them and an old scrappy t-shirt and seem like the coolest thing in the room. And others, and I know I could not get away with that. If I walked into a room like that, I don't have the persona that pulls that off.
Right.
But part of what people are buying when they buy your art is your story. And so especially when you can be charismatic, when you can connect with people, when you can be at a gallery opening and tell people about your art, that carries so much weight to the piece. I've watched artists take somebody from being like, I would never buy original art. Are you kidding me? This is crazy, to buying their piece and thanking the artist for the opportunity to buy their piece just through that level of charisma and connection. And this is when I'd say, so we have a lot of things on this list you yourself may not be good at. I've mentioned taking classes, but there are a few other things you can do. One skill I would add to this list is theater, speech, presentation skills. And one of the best ways to do that is go take an improv class, right? If you've never taken an improv class, even if you are mortified of performing in public, it is such a good experience and will help you get out of your shell. And then another thing you could do is in your own community, these resources are out there in your community. A great way to get connected with them is to join one of the professional clubs in town, like Rotary. Because when you join that, first of all, it's communicating that you are a small business owner yourself, and you are if you're selling your own artwork. And then second of all, that's where you can build those friendships and those relationships, where you can find an accountant, you can find a marketer who may be able to help you or give you a deal. And maybe also they want something cool for their office, or they want, they want to buy a gift for somebody. You need to think of yourself in this business, professional world and professional sense, in the same way that an accountant or an insurance agent or any other sort of white collar worker has to think of themselves. If your goal is selling art, if your goal is having fun, then some of these aren't as important, and that's cool.
Right. And I think that's a big deal. I've had a lot of artist friends, and they have different goals. As I mentioned, I've compromised a lot of my work. I mean, there's something to be said for, there are times that I have been able to achieve the career that I want, but there are times that I can look at the work I've done and said, not one of these things is entirely mine. And I kind of have to live with that. There are times that I will take a time aside and say, I'm going to draw something that is not for publication. It is not to be sold. I don't want people to look at it. I don't want any feedback, because I have to fulfill myself. So the goals can change for the moment as well.
Mm-hmm. And you've already noted, over the course of your career, these things are going to change as well. We know, like marketing, for example, I feel like just as soon as we get good at something, or just as soon as we get our website in a place where it looks good and modern and is working, the whole system changes and you have to start over again. And so, or a new social media platform takes over. And
that's really hard. That's what I struggle with.
Yeah. Stuart, someday we need to do a whole session that is just letting out the emotional angst of taxes in every state of the union, right?
So what she's talking about was, so I traveled the country selling my work. And so one of the things I had to do was I have to get tax permits for all these different states I sell in. I have to file on time. I have to make sure I'm registered. I've looked at artists, and this is absolutely overwhelming for so many of them. And if it is, that can be okay, but that means that you need to find someone who can help you with it, so you can hire somebody. All these things are obstacles. You either figure out how to get through it or to go around it, because they will pop up.
Yeah, absolutely. Just acknowledging some chats here. Stephanie says yes and, which is like the battle cry of the improviser. Good job. Alexandria said she's already starting to take some improv classes, so good on that. And Cynthia says maybe an improv class is in order, even though it does mortify her. And Cynthia, if you get through it, you'll have the performer's high afterwards. It'll feel great. You'll be able to say, you did that. If you can do that, you can do anything, right? So moving on to our next slide here, we just want to talk through again what these different choices. So look back at your quiz, those 5 questions, what answers did you write down there? And we can talk through how that can shape your actions moving forward. So if your real goal is to make a living as an artist, you've got to make some hard commitments going forward, right? Stuart's already talked about some of those, but Stuart, can you talk about some of the rest of the circumstances you were in when you decided, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make this happen?
Oh, for me, it's almost awful. I had graduated college. I was trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do. I didn't go to art school. I studied journalism. I was self-taught. But I started thinking about the money that I was going to have to invest into this, to making a comic book, as well as the time. And I literally called my parents and asked them if I could move back home with them. And I can remember I came back to Indianapolis, And people hadn't seen me for years because I was down at IU, and they said, "What are you doing?" "Oh, you're back in town." And I told them, I'm living with my parents. I'm saving my money. I'm going to publish a comic book. And so many of them said, "Awesome. That sounds so cool. That is so exciting." And I could tell there were a lot of them that thought that that sounded really awful, as a waste of time, kind of stupid and juvenile. And there was a time when it was really kind of awkward. Didn't have any money. It was kind of hard to explain what I was doing. I will tell you, it was not great for landing dates. That's the truth. But the thing came out, and it did okay. And I was proud of the book. I was never as happy in my life as the first comic book convention I did when I sold my first copy, and somebody said, "Will you sign it for me?" There was that validation. It was this thing that I'd wanted to do, and I climbed Mount Everest. Now, it wasn't too long to where I got at the top of the mountain and looked up and found there was a bigger mountain. I got the first issue done. Before long, the second issue came out. I got to where I had enough fans, had enough material, I could make a living. And I will tell you, a very funny thing happened. About the time that I got the job for Lego, which was only 3 years after I'd been self-publishing comic books. That's a lot of time to, stick your neck out there and spend your own dime. I got that breakthrough job, and there were an awful lot of people who had kind of made fun of me for pursuing it, who suddenly turned to sour grapes. And that was very real. I heard a lot of people say I could have done that. And my response to them always was, "You should do that. Go ahead and do it. It's really hard. I dare you to do it." And in fact, I'm kind of love that this, as a side note, this slide you have up here, this artist in question here is Adam Fields. And Adam is an artist that I met at a comic book store. He decided that he wanted to be an artist when he was already married and had children and had a lot of responsibilities. And he asked me just to give him some advice. And I did a lot of things to try to tell him how difficult it would be, and to some extent discourage him because he had a lot of responsibility. He nodded his head. He took it all in. And I've never seen anybody work and hustle as hard as Adam. And that's why he has a living as an artist right now. A good one.
Josie says, "My parents gave me the same reaction when I said I'm pursuing being a character concept artist. I'm going to succeed, though. I demand myself to succeed." So that determination can pay off. And sometimes you have to just turn off that radar that suddenly allows you to see yourself through somebody else's eyes. Sometimes you just can't accept that, right? You have to see yourself at the end of the path.
Well, what's the old joke on this too? It's like your unemployed friends don't want you to get a job, right? Your out of shape friends don't want you to join a gym. Your weight friends don't want you to go on a diet. It's like there are all these reasons to not do these things. And anytime you do anything that looks a little bit like you're trying or breaking the mold or whatever, it can be threatening to people. This isn't a normal path, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, and so then alternately, so if the business side of it isn't as important to you, if making your living off of this isn't the reason that you're in the arts, there are plenty of other paths to pursue too. That's when it's a great time to get involved with an arts organization. And there's so many around the state that are so great at supporting community artists, who can give you some opportunities, who can connect you with other artists. If you want to get that art done, then we're going to really encourage you to clear your runway of all the other crap, right? Don't waste your time in networking sessions necessarily. Don't waste your time trying to win the awards at the shows. If you want to just make art, build your structure around that concept, and come to places like Nickel Plate and the Tippecanoe Arts Federation and other folks who can help leverage resources to get that done for you.
Yeah, I'll speak to this. So I've always wanted a basketball goal and a place to play basketball. My greatest basketball days are long past, and I played a lot, but I was never good at it. I always enjoyed it though. I found a way to have it fit within the realm of what I wanted to do. Look, I'm not a young kid anymore. I need to get some exercise, so I get some benefit from that. It is something that is still fun for me. Right now, all I'm trying to do is see if I can hit more than half of my free throw shots. That's my personal goal. I'm not going to make the team. There's no team for me to make anymore, but that doesn't mean that I stopped playing basketball. And so as far as people making art, I mean, this is a broad thing. This is such a personal thing. Can this be just a hobby? Can this be something that you deal with sort of internal issues with? I know a lot of people do a lot of self-exploration through art. figure out what it is you want out of it, and it'll always serve you better. And realistically, I think people who have found a way to really identify what it is they want out of art, they usually stick with it their entire lives.
Mhm.
And that's kind of an incredible thing, because a lot of things kind of come and go in your life, but this is an impersonal thing you can internalize and kind of engage with it on the level you need it.
And as a community arts advocate, I definitely argue that I think that's important for everybody. I think everybody needs to keep some connection to the arts for their entire lives. But you know, if your motivation for making art or being an artist is maybe something uglier than what we've discussed so far, you may have a path that has to be bulldozed, that you have to bulldoze yourself. But we can remember there have been lots of artists throughout history who have taken that uglier path of proving people wrong. We're showing the Our Mutt piece by Marcel Duchamp here, because his goals were definitely to not follow the established path in the art scene. And he figured out a way to make that really work for him. Monet and Van Gogh were in the same boat at one point, right? And then kind of Duchamp was even reacting against them. You want to say anything about Duchamp, Mr. Art History major?
I adore him. You know, you could have picked a dozen pieces from him, but no, I mean, that's what's so great about Duchamp. I think Duchamp got to do it on his terms. He is a great person to show us the slide here, because it's easy to say all these things about how he's going against what other people thought or wanted, but I think the reality is he wasn't as caught up in that so much as just doing what he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
His art became a really personal thing. I think that he would have made art whether it had made it to a museum or anything else at all. You know, I think a lot of people sort of say, well, I'm not an artist, I don't have a lot of art around me, but I think they'd be surprised. You know, I think a diary is a really intimate thing that kind of does a lot of the same purpose, serves a lot of the same purposes as being an artist. I've known people say, oh, I'm not an artist, but they are deeply invested in, you know, picking out the right pair of shoes for an outfit. All this stuff has meaning to us. And that's how that's what this is all about, finding out what the meaning for art is for us. Well,
and we're coming up to where we want to make sure we get some time for questions and answers,
yeah.
But we do want to pose this question because I know it's one that's near and dear to Stuart's heart. So Stuart, what if your understanding of reality makes your goals impossible?
So you got a couple options here. You either have to change your goals, you have to change reality, which that can happen. That sounds kind of odd, but I mean,
Duchamp kind of did that, right? So
well, and beyond that, there are some people who can do some things like sometimes people can go through some really major changes in life. You know, getting in shape, going on a diet, moving across country, taking on something really hard. You know, like I want to learn this particular skill. But I think there's something to be said for if you go through your list and you say, this is what I want, these are what my strengths are, and you just sort of look at it and you say, these don't fit together. There's something to be said for acknowledging that you're going to have to change something to get what you want, or this is not going to work, right?
And so going back and looking at the list you've made today can help you kind of poke holes in it, right? Which of those things are rigid and absolute to you, and which are squishy and might be something you can mold in a different direction to help you achieve a different reality. Because
a great one I love. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, because there is going to be a point in your career where you are not able to achieve the thing you thought you wanted. And so you have to find ways to manage that, even for your own emotional health.
A great one I love is there's a writer who I'm friends with, and he was complaining a little bit about his scripts being altered. He'd worked on TV and movies. And I said, you know, if you get to work in comic books, they don't monkey with what you're writing too much. You get a lot more freedom. And his response to that was, yeah, people, they don't respect comic books the same way. And it dawned on me from talking with him that one of the things that was really important to him was fame. Like, that was key. He really wanted that recognition, you know. So we were talking about the problem of creative control, and it came up that was a problem for him, but that was not such a problem that he was willing to sacrifice the pursuit of fame for it. And that's, I think, the core of what this is going on here, because to me, I kind of felt like fame was not something I was looking for. I wanted security, financial security, and the opportunity to work in this industry that I loved. I was willing to compromise the work I did so I could work with editors and make a living. And kind of like my editors I joked with, I want to be able to spend time with my friends and family and, work on my fantasy football league. Not necessarily fantasy football and me, it's play basketball, but whatever the other thing is. And that's why I love it that we listed fame and money and these other things, because you'll surprise yourself if you're really honest with you. There are some things that are much more important to you that you didn't necessarily think you wanted, and others that you really will compromise without much pain. When my first comic book I self-published, I considered taking it to a publisher, and I had written it, drawn it, lettered it, published it, colored it, everything. And this publisher asked me, he said, would you be interested or willing to take on another letterer? He wasn't delighted with my lettering. And I said to him, yeah, I would do that if that would make the difference with getting the book done. That wasn't a key component to me. If he had said, would you let someone else write it? I would say no. Would I let someone else color it? I would say no. But these things aren't all equal, and we need to recognize that.
Yeah, that's great. Moving through quickly too, we just wanted to take a minute to also have you think about, if you know your own goals and you've really thought through them, that may give you some opportunities to recognize or identify other people's goals when you encounter them. And that can also then really help you achieve success. If you can understand somebody else's goals in this industry, or somebody that you're relying on for help, it's easier to help them achieve them or help avoid the pitfalls, right? So Alice in the chat has already talked about how other artists can have sharp elbows and sharp tongues and can really be nasty in this industry. And
Yes,
if you can recognize that and know that that's something that is hard for you, you can navigate your path in a different direction, or you can maybe see them coming.
I think one of the things to note here, and I've been thinking more and more about this about the last 2 years or so. I'm an adult, you're an adult. I think when we were younger, we often had a sensation of, I want to be like them. We'd see somebody who had sort of achieved or was doing something that we had aspirations to be. I think it's a good idea to sort of re-engage with that sort of thought process. If you can find an artist who is sort of doing what you want to do, okay, how did they get where they are? There were a couple artists in my particular industry that I learned a lot from. There's one in particular named David Mack. I met him when I was fairly young. And yes, he's a great artist and a very good writer. But what I really responded to was how open and conversational he was with his fans. I looked at it and I saw that they were really responding to him as much as his work. And it was funny because that strength lined up well with my strengths. I thought, oh, I've got this asset that I didn't know about. So it's not all about just, you said that earlier, just making the art, but I really think look around and see somebody who sees where you are, and they can kind of give you a little bit of a roadmap.
Yeah, exactly. You can really learn from other people if you recognize, oh, they're on their goals are similar to mine. So one more thing we want to ask you to do, if you use an electronic calendar, open it up right now and pick October 14th, 2021, and put a reminder in for yourself to come back to this list. You can even put the questions and answers from your list in that reminder. If you're somebody who uses a physical calendar and you have your 2021 calendar already, paperclip your notes in there. Yeah, that's Stuart. We want you to come back in 1 year and re-examine these questions and your answers to them. What's changed? Where did you succeed? What failures did you see coming? What failures did you not see coming? What's your next big hurdle? And what assets do you have to invest now, a year later? And is it all worth it? That's always really important to ask yourself. There may be times where you're going down a path that just doesn't achieve what you want it to achieve, and you need to exercise that too.
Yep.
We want to get to the discussion here, and I'm just going to leave this slide up so that you guys can get a hold of us if you need to. We also want to invite you to a couple of things. Nickel Plate Arts is open to all of you. Please drop by a First Friday or visit our website, which is www.nickelplatearts.org. You can sign up for our artist newsletter and get lots of opportunities. We'd also love to invite you to participate on Stuart's live feed. He has a weekly live feed on Facebook at 8 p.m. on Thursdays. So if you want to see some more tips and tricks, especially of how to engage people in a digital way when shows and events aren't happening as much, we invite you to do that as well. So with the few minutes we have left,
I want to throw one thing out there too. So I am happy to talk to you guys all about all of this. So if you go to my website, there are a lot of different signings and things I do in person. I'm happy to ask questions in person. I know that this Saturday I'm going to be at Kokomo for the Kokomo Comic Con. The Saturday after that, I'm at Comic Carnival signing. And the Saturday after that, which is Halloween, I'll be at Krypton Comics. Walk on in, see me in person, and literally let's talk about it. I mean it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a great point too. If you do want to come be in an in-person event that is handled safely for COVID standards, you can come talk in person, and Stuart will love that. I can vouch for that. I started answering Alexandria's question via the chat, but I think I'm just going to do it out loud now. Alexandria says, what's the best way to say, I want to emulate you? And Alexandria, I'll say most artists I have met, like virtually all of them, are so flattered when somebody admires what they're doing. Especially, I mean, all artists love having their art admired, but being admired as a good business person, or as somebody who has a technique outside of their art that is worthy of emulation, is always flattering. So I think it's important to approach people and let them know, I really admire what you're doing. I think I'm interested in having you as a mentor. That's a good way to approach it. You just want to make sure you're not coming across as, I'm going to steal everything you're doing so that I can succeed, right? But if you come at it from that respectful, like, I'd like to take you on as a mentor, I think that's an easy conversation to initiate. Go ahead, Stuart.
Our answers are really, really close on this. As an artist, what would I like someone to say to me? Honestly, this is it. I would like someone to say, thank you, I learned a lot from you. I think that's the best way to do it. If you're trying to say, I want to emulate you, that does come off a little bit strong, because I think realistically, what you want to do is, that's an internal feeling. You want to emulate that person, but you also really want to be yourself. So you would take from me that which has meaning to you, and abandon the parts of me that don't. But I think just to acknowledge the people who you have learned things from, whose work you admire, and say it just for what it is. Something that I hear very regularly is someone will say, I'm an artist too, I'm interested in this. You know, just to approach it like that, or I'm interested in learning this. How did you do this? As a side note, a story I really love is an artist I greatly admire is a gentleman named Bill Sienkiewicz, and he wows people all the time with his technique. And I saw him answering questions for somebody once, and I said, I can't believe you're giving them all your good stuff. And he said, well, I am. Now it's up to them to do something with it. And I thought that was such a great message. You know, it's you wanted to know the answer, here it is, now go run with it. You know, hopefully that person will come back in a year and say, look what I did from what you taught me.
Yeah. We have time for probably one or two more questions. Anybody else want to pose another question? We definitely are excited. You know, the hard thing about an online conference like this is that we can't see you. We don't know if you're asleep. We don't know if you went and had a coffee break. So any feedback is good. Doris says, I'm going to adjust building a relationship with someone first. I can't stand it when people, often even without punctuation, ask, how do you do whatever? I know another question that drives a lot of artists crazy is, how long did it take to do that? Yeah. And as a side note, I'm going to tell you to get over that right now, because it's sometimes the only way people who don't feel comfortable with the arts know how to initiate a conversation. So take it as a conversation starter. Don't let it annoy you. But absolutely, the people jumping in without thinking, saying, wait, how did you do that? can be a barrier as an artist, but it is also something you can really take as a compliment, right? If they were so drawn in by your art that they want to know how you did it.
I will tell you this. Now, this is where I've got an ugly, you want to talk about the ugly side? I've done this where people say, how did you do this? And sometimes I'll say, here, let me show you. And I will very deliberately pull out a piece of paper, and I will make a piece as quickly and look as effortlessly as possible. It may not even be the most challenging piece, but I will do my best to make it look really easy, just because I kind of want it to drive home that, guess what? This was easy for me because I worked really hard at it. Because I honestly think that a lot of people can do this stuff. Not everybody can, but everybody can be better. And nothing gets you further ahead than effort.
Great. That's a wonderful, wonderful way to close things out here. We've got several people chiming in saying thank you. Thanks for offering some introspective, self-reflective questions. I've seen the word re-energizing, and that's definitely something we wanted to achieve today.
Well, I do want to say I also enjoy talking about these things. I think this is hard to do. A lot of people can feel overwhelmed by this, and a lot of people do get overwhelmed by this. I know people who have pursued art for a while and they get burnt out or something gets in the way and they quit. This isn't for everybody, I think. Not to this really high dialed up level. It's important for you to figure out where you fit within this. But I mean it when I said it. I'm always happy to talk to people about this. I'm happy to look at people's work. I really like art. You know, I'm self-taught, but I got a second major in art history. So if you ever see me, please come up and talk to me about what you want to know about. The worst thing that's going to happen is I'll say, I don't know.
Yes. Awesome. Well, it's a little after 3. We started at 2:02. Here it is 3:02. We want to make sure that you are able to enjoy other sessions today. So please reach out to us. I'll share the screen one more time so that you can see our contact information. Please do reach out to us. Let us know how we can help you. If you just get in a creative lockup and you need somebody to cheerlead you, I love that. If you need somebody to commiserate with, Stuart's great at that too. So, or you want a portfolio review or any of those kinds of things, we're here to help. So thank you all so much and have a great day.
Be good, everyone.